Superintendent of Schools here in the Napa Valley Unified School District. Before we get started and I introduce my colleague presenters for this afternoon's meeting, I'm going to go ahead and have our interpreters notify everyone who may be a Spanish speaker of the Spanish option. So Isidra or Claudia.
La opción de español.
Isidra or Claudia?
Yeah, excuse the interpreter. Yeah, the interpreter's interpreting right now.
Okay.
Doctor, yeah, the Spanish interpreter was interpreting simultaneously what you just said. So we are conducting the interpretation as you speak. Thank you.
Great. Can you please just explain to families in Spanish how they can access the interpretation services en español? Can you say that in español, please?
Of course. Y también a los padres de familia les vamos a explicar la manera en la que pueden ustedes escuchar los servicios en interpretación. Ustedes pueden ver un icono en la pantalla, en la parte inferior en medio, tiene inglés y español. Entonces, si pueden hacer un chasqueo o un clic en el donde dice Spanish, y de esa manera ustedes pueden escuchar los servicios de interpretación durante todo este segmento. Gracias.
Thank you. All right, with that, we'll get started. I want to introduce my colleague presenters today.
Quisiera comenzar a introducir a mis presentadores y colegas el día de hoy.
Claudia, ¿te podemos oír? Por favor de apagar. So I'm going to introduce my colleague and presenters today. I'm here with Assistant Superintendent Pat Andrew Jennings. Pat, would you like to say hello?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad you're able to join us today.
And I'm also here with our Director of Elementary Curriculum, Instruction, and English Learner Services, Mr. Matt Manning.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Matt Manning, as Dr. Musetti said, and I'm looking forward to engaging with you this afternoon.
And just to make sure you're in the right engagement session, since we do have 3 scheduled this afternoon, this is for elementary parents. So good afternoon, everyone. We have close to 1,000 people participating and still ticking up here. This is a tremendous turnout clearly, and it demonstrates the dedication to education in the community here in Napa Valley Unified School District. It also shows clearly that we have lots of questions, many questions, understandably. It's been less than a week since we made the announcement that we would start the school year online in a virtual learning format, remote learning. And we are providing in NVUSD, as you all know, if you've read our communication and or watched the board meeting, we're providing how they prefer to have their children return to school starting on the first day of school, August 20th. We felt it was really important to give families options because in 28 schools with 17,000 students, over 17,000 students, we clearly have a very wide range of needs and desires. And we also want to ensure that we're providing consistency within our curriculum and our services to the best of our ability. We all know that schools are built upon very formalized structures, and our concepts of school have had to be redefined due to the extenuating circumstances that the pandemic has placed on us as educational leaders, and of course you as parents. So before getting started, I just want to start with a very big thank you, an expression of gratitude and appreciation. We appreciate your patience and your understanding as we navigate a lot of volatile conditions and a lot of uncertainties. And there is some truth to the fact that given that we're operating schools in the pandemic, we are building the plane as we fly it because we've never had to redefine and redesign the opening of school in these sorts of conditions. So I want to thank you. And I want to recognize the tremendous stress. I'm a parent myself. And I know that this has been incredibly stressful for our parents as they figure out their circumstances for the fall. We've been working really hard to enhance how we will take this new set of circumstances to bring the very best solution to educating our kids during the pandemic that has really upended all of our lives. So today we are hosting the first, and I emphasize the first, of a series of parent engagement meetings to reiterate our goals and clarify to the best of our ability what school will look like in the fall. You know, the announcement just came out a week ago. We've been working all summer, but there's a lot of sort of moving parts as we build these program options for the first time. And we are working with a set of constraints, and we'll share what some of those constraints are through the course of the next 45 minutes. We are going to do our very best to provide more information and answer to your questions. We received nearly 400 of them, so thank you to those who submitted their pre-submitted questions. We're very grateful for that. And obviously we cannot answer 400 questions in one session, but we are going to try and address some of the emerging themes. There were dozens and dozens of questions that pertain to individual situations and family circumstances. And to be very honest, these specific questions are not necessarily something that we will be able to manage in this venue. And we can't necessarily answer with all the details that parents are currently looking for, because we are still in the process of designing the details of the model. Many of the details are contingent upon the data that we receive from you in terms of how the numbers are going to play out in terms of some of that parent choice. And in addition, many of the, with redesigning school for the fall, all of this has an impact on the working conditions of our teachers. We work within the constraints of a contract with our Teachers Association. And so with every decision, we have to engage in dialogue, negotiations, and shared decision-making with our labor unions, which is just another component of the work that we want you to be aware of. The situation underscores that at the core, our school systems are really built on those traditional stable structures. And we're finding it all, you as parents, us as leaders, it's very challenging to operate in an environment that demands such fluid structure and responsive structure. So again, we ask for your patience. I am very confident that no matter which option your family decides, we have the people, the plans, and the practices to be a shining example in the 2021 school year for how education can continue, and hopefully continue in a very productive way. Okay, so far, based on those options, just to kind of give everybody a read on the data, we want to thank the 4,000 families. So about 23% of our families have already submitted their choice. We've heard a lot of questions about each option, so we hope to answer many of them through the presentation that the instructional team will deliver in the next half hour or so. I know how important it feels, how important it is for families to feel like they're making the best decision for their child and family. However, the guiding principle of the phased approach that we took to the school board on Thursday, the distinction between those two programs is that we need to know whether or not you're a family that is not comfortable sending your school while the pandemic is going on, or if you are a family that is willing to engage in the phased approach with us, having students move through the phases, increasing their time between phase 2 and phase 3 of our phased framework, increasing their time on campus, ultimately getting to 5 days a week. We recognize that many of your questions that you asked, I reviewed all 385 of them. Many of you feel that the answers to those questions will inform your decision. But again, the guiding principle around the choice is whether or not you are willing to return to an in-person model. Some answers we do have. Some of the answers to your questions we do have. Others we are actively working on, again, through union negotiations and through finalizing some of our program design. Questions have ranged from exactly, which classes at the high school level will be available? Will online sessions be recorded for later viewing? What if we're 2 working parents? What could be some of our potential childcare solutions? What's kindergarten going to look like? Will there be a recess scheduled? And can you switch options? Some of these questions we are currently working on, so you have my dedication that we will continue to take in your questions. As decisions and details get worked through, we will continue to update our extensive frequently asked question document and continue to do outward-facing communication to all of our families, all while also consistently communicating in the written format via Parent Square to all of you. Now, we had questions that fell in some themes around safety, childcare, and then lots of questions around the 2 instructional options. So if we can advance the slide, please. So how we're going to handle sort of, today's topics is I will just quickly remind everybody about the 4 phases. We'll address some of the questions based on that we received based on your input. The chat is open, as many of you have already started to chat. I'll just set the expectation out the gate. We will not be able to answer everyone's questions in the chat. However, what we will be doing is printing the transcript of the chat in order to, again, understand what is the information people need and what are the details people are looking for, and then use that input along with the 400 questions that we received to, again, update FAQ and continue to send communication to our families so that they feel like they're getting the best information possible. And then we're going to spend most of the time on schedules and program models, because the core of the questions were around schedule and program models between those 2 options. Some questions emerged around safety, and the return to in-person. I really encourage anybody that had questions around safety during our Board of Education presentation on Thursday, which is archived. You can hear Assistant Superintendent Mike Pearson. He did provide a presentation around all of the in-person safety guidelines, precautions, and protocols that the district has been working on for when we reach phase 2 or phase 3 for in-person. So we won't spend a lot of time there because we want to spend most of today's discussion around phase 1. But we're very confident that when we are prepared to open for in-person instruction, that we will do that with strong adherence to all of the safety guidelines that we are receiving from the various entities. Childcare, big issue. It's an emerging issue with our own employee workforce, so we're working through that. And we're just facing a childcare crisis as a community. It's really clear that, childcare is it's a real challenge. We recognize the hardship that this pandemic has brought to our parents, and especially to working parents. I'm one, so I totally get it. Childcare is a very real concern, and as a school district, we want to offer support in any way that we can. We are currently researching a childcare strategy, examining our capacity to be able to offer any childcare options. We have a strategy meeting. We're meeting with childcare partners in our community early next week. And so stay tuned. If we're able to provide, any childcare supports within our system, we'll make sure to make that very clear to our parents. But we are currently not in a position to discuss any of those details because to date we have no childcare programs to offer. But please know that we are paying close attention to that issue to see how we can first help our employees so that they can be here to deliver the programs, and then also determine how we can support any potential families who may be in need, and we know there are many. So with that, we're gonna just quickly look at, if you could advance the slide. Just a reminder, NVUSD has adopted a 4-phase model. If you read our material or if you watched the board meeting, you're familiar with the framework. Phase 4 is when things get close to normal, back to normal. Our target in these pandemic conditions is to be able to, when public health conditions allow, to get to the phase 3 in-person model, where students will be divided into morning and afternoon cohorts coming to school 5 days a week. Before we jump to phase 3, once we have clearance from Napa County Public Health, we will have an intermediary phase, phase 2, where students will be coming a couple mornings a week or a couple afternoons a week in order for us to kind of transition in or transition from all online learning into the in-person model. Across all 4 phases, the families who are not comfortable will, returning during pandemic conditions at all, they have the choice of the Virtual Learning Academy. So with that, I am going to go ahead and toss it to our our Assistant Superintendent of Instructional Services, who's going to be diving into the instructional model, and hopefully will answer many of your questions along the way.
Good afternoon to everyone. I know that these are incredibly challenging times for all of us, that the choices that families are having to make regarding the options for their children and how to best support them. These are choices that none of us want to make. So I want to just give you some reassurance that we are working incredibly hard to make sure that your needs, that your children are thought of first. So there were two options that were provided for families. One is the option one that Dr. Musetti referenced around online to in-person learning option. And these are really for families that that they know that they want their child back in school when public health conditions allow. And the option two is for families that are uncomfortable attending school under any circumstance during the pandemic. And so we are going to talk a little bit specifically about what the difference is, because we receive a lot of questions around the difference between those two models. Matt, can you okay, perfect. So the schedule, and this information was sent out to families earlier this week. If you look at the two differences, the schedule for the online to in-person is that AM, PM schedule or model, which, just a sec, where some students would attend school in the morning and some students would attend school in the afternoon. And the time that they're not in school would be independent student work time. Director Manning is going to get a little more in depth around the difference between, or what's going to actually happen during that 2.5 hour time in the morning or afternoon that students are engaged live and in person. The Virtual Learning Academy, there will be daily live instruction as well. There'll be a little bit more flexibility around that. It's not quite modeled after independent study, where in our independent study program, students are seen 1 day a week, sometimes 2 days a week in the elementary grades, and then they're given work that they do at home, independent with support from their families. In the Virtual Learning Academy option, it's more aligned with what's happening for the students who are on track for the online to in-person learning. The live instruction, both the online to in-person model and the Virtual Learning Academy have that component, that there will be 2 hours of 2 hours, it says 2.5 to 3 hours, but it's 2.5 for elementary and 3 for secondary. And like I said, Director Manning will talk a little bit more about the difference between, or what's going to actually occur during that time. We're using district adopted curriculum for both programs, so students will have similar work in terms of the content, and obviously it's standards aligned. And in terms of the additional teacher support time, in both models, there are smaller groups of students that will be working with teachers. Because we went with the AM/PM model, you have the smaller groups that are zooming in to the teacher. So instead of a group of 24 students in a Zoom session, like what happened in the spring, we have a group of like maybe 12 kids that would be zooming in, which will allow more individualized and personalized attention. And the same occurs with the Virtual Learning Academy. And then the biggest difference, obviously, is in-person instruction. It's as soon as allowable for those who are online to in-person, that in-person instruction will happen. And for the Virtual Learning Academy option, that would not be an option. There would be no in-person instruction. Do you want to go to the next slide?
I do just want to take a logistical moment before the transition. So we are turning off the chat. There has been a participant that has used inappropriate, offensive language, and we have no tolerance for that here in NVUSD. So unfortunately, we're dealing with it in the technical background, so we appreciate your patience. We'll continue with the presentation, but I did just want to make the announcement and let everyone know that we have no tolerance for that type of offensive language. Proceed.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Massetti. Director Manning is going to talk a little bit more about what the schedule actually looks like for our two groups, our AM and PM cohort. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about what the schedule will look like. And this is the schedule for the in-person to the distance learning to in-person model, as well as the virtual learning academy. So the schedule that we have put together provides for an AM cohort of students who would be engaged with their teacher either online or in person once we're able to do that, from 8 to 10:30. And then there's a block of time in the middle of the day from 10:30 to 12:30 when teachers are not with students. That's a time when cleaning would be happening on campuses, when we're back on campuses. That's also a time when meetings would be happening. Teacher lunch and work time happens during that intermediary time. And then from 12:30 to 3 o'clock is the PM cohort. And I wanted to just kind of call out why we are opting for that model, even in the virtual learning academy and the distance learning phase of instruction. And the reason is, there's a couple important reasons. One is that it provides a seamless transition into the in-person model. So if students are starting out in the distance learning model, it allows them to remain in their same cohort and go into the in-person model. It really provides consistency all the way from phase 1 through phase 3. Another important aspect of this model in the virtual setting is that it provides much smaller classes in Zoom. And we know from our experience last spring that the larger classes in the Zoom setting can be challenging. So this reduces the number of students in a Zoom setting by half. So that's some of the rationale just for why we would opt to maintain that cohorting in the virtual aspects of our instructional model as well. So I also want to share with you some of, this is a sample schedule of what would be happening during that 2.5-hour block. Again, I want to emphasize that this is a sample schedule. This might look different from grade level to grade level, but this is what we're working from right now in the planning phase. So this is an AM example. So from 8 o'clock to 8:10 would be an arrival time, an opportunity for students to connect with their teacher and classmates. Attendance would be taken, followed by an ELA block. So this is about a 1-hour ELA block, and this is not time when the teacher would be talking at or to the students for the entire time. There would be some opportunities for direct instruction there, and then time when students would be working on their own but have access to the teacher in that virtual setting. There's an opportunity for a break there. We know students can't be sitting for that entire 2.5-hour block, so there's an opportunity to get up, stretch, move around, and do that in a way probably that would be fun and engaging for kids. We want this to be fun. And then from 9:15 to 10:15 is a math lesson, following that same pattern as the ELA lesson, and then ending the day with a closing activity, some connecting time for students. We're building in, especially at the outset of our year with students, a lot of opportunities for connection and processing what students have been going through as part of the pandemic and being in a new school setting. We have students who will be joining us for the first time as kindergarten and TK students. So we really want to spend a lot of time at the beginning of the year engaging in some of those connecting activities around wellness and social emotional wellness. But we also want to continue that through the year, not just at the beginning of the year. So there will be time in the schedule for that as well. And I want to, in reading some of the questions and hearing from parents, a couple of themes are strongly emerging. One is around screen time. So I want to reiterate that this time is not all time when students would be staring at a screen or hearing directly from their teacher on the screen. Part of this time would be students working independently and just being able to engage with their teacher as a resource. Their teacher would be there present for them as a resource, but not staring necessarily at a screen. Students will have their materials. Parents will be able to pick up student materials at school sites and have those materials so students can be working in a paper and pencil format as well, not just against staring at a screen. Another theme that emerged was around flexibility. Parents are voicing the challenge that comes up when we're engaging in synchronous learning, meaning that we're all the students and teacher are together at the same time. So we're addressing that, we're responding to that, and one of the possibilities is around recording lessons. We might, 2.5 hours of the lesson wouldn't need to be recorded. We might be able to record just those parts of the lesson where the teacher is providing the direct instruction, and the parents could work with their students' children later in the evening when they have time to do so. Again, we're working through some of those aspects of this instructional model, and that's part of our negotiation, part of our process of working with our teachers association. So more to come on that as we work through those conversations. Pat? Oh. You're muted.
Okay. Before I start to launch into some of the more specific questions that came up in the parent entries, I wanted to just go back a little bit and talk about the Virtual Learning Academy. There were lots of questions around like who the teachers are going to be, will my child be connected or be able to return to their home school if they enter the Virtual Learning Academy, and in terms of, and then how will they be assigned? And so many of those questions are unanswered, but I'll be able to answer the questions that I can. So the teachers that are going to be teaching the Virtual Learning Academy would be pulled from around the district. It wouldn't necessarily be the teacher at your site, at your child's current site. It might be, but we're not sure. Also, in terms of students assignment, like when will they know who their teacher is? How will they, those are things that we're continuing to work out, and we'll have a much better idea once we know how many families we're working to serve. So if it's, a couple hundred or 1,000 or whatever, we need those numbers to sort of begin the process of getting appropriate staffing and appropriate teachers for that. There were lots of questions about if I choose the Virtual Learning Academy and my child is enrolled in it, do I lose my spot in my homeschool? And the answer is no, you don't. So if you were enrolled at Browns Valley and you attend and you chose the Virtual Learning Academy as your option for the 6-month or the full year, then you would keep your spot at Browns Valley, even if you were on open enrollment or however you were registered at the school. There were questions about if I choose to homeschool my child and then bring them back, would I still have the spot in my child's school? If you actually take your kid out of our school system in terms of unregistering them and registering them somewhere else, then it may be possible for you to return to your homeschool, but we're not 100% sure that we'll be able to accommodate that. But if they're enrolled in the Virtual Learning Academy, their spot would be saved in their homeschool. I think those were the ones that were specific to the Virtual Learning Academy that I wanted to touch on. There were many questions around student safety. When we get to phase 2 and phase 3, we can talk more in detail about that, but I would just reference you to the board presentation. Assistant Superintendent Pearson did an absolute beautiful job of sort of detailing all of the safety measures that are starting to put in place. If you, at school sites, there's plexiglass for our staff being installed in the main office. And then for our students, the principals are getting ready in the next week to walk campuses and detail what plans they need to make sure that students are safe in terms of directions and drop off and pickup zones. So there will, and a detailed safety plan that will be shared with families. So there are many efforts in terms of when we get to the in-person model, phase 2, we'll definitely send out to parents the safety measures that we were taking at our sites. The family learning series, one of the pieces of feedback we got from families from the spring is that they needed more assistance and support to be able to help their kids. So we are planning before school starts a series of virtual trainings for families on the different platforms, the different tools that we're using, and just a bunch of different learning series on topics that will help you assist your child. Dr. Musetti talked about childcare, and we are working closely with our childcare partners to make sure that families have some options when it comes to childcare in whatever model of or whatever phase we're in, and more information will be coming out regarding that. And then there were many questions around technology and access, and we did an amazing job, our tech department did an amazing job of getting and distributing almost 4,000, I think, Chromebooks in the spring. We will continue those families who did not pick up one, they will be available before school starts. It'll be part of our distribution of materials to make sure that our incoming kinders have either some kind of device, and then if we have families that are without internet access, we'll have a way for them to contact us to get that for them. Or to get a hotspot. And some very specific questions about supports for students with special needs came up in our questions. There is going to be a special town hall for families with students with special needs, and that'll be on Monday at 6 o'clock. And the executive director of special education will be there with me, and we'll be answering questions that are specific to our students with special needs. So I look forward to engaging you guys around that. The next slide. And the Family Support Learning Series, it'll start August 10th through the 14th. We will have staff training going on at the same time, but we'll also be sending you a selection of the training so that you can sign up and attend those virtually. And those will continue up until the start of school, and they'll actually continue on during the initial part of the school year. And just another announcement about the first day of school has been moved. I don't know if Dr. Musetti talked about that. I can't remember. It was originally scheduled for August 19th. It's been moved to August 20th to allow us one more day to provide training to our staff so that they are prepared and ready to launch this very strange, unusual start to a school year. So.
Okay, so just I'm going to kind of flesh out just a couple more of the themes that came from the 400 questions that we received, and have Mr. Manning and Assistant Superintendent Andrew Jennings respond to some of those. And then if time allows, again, we will not be able to answer questions around unique circumstances, but we'll do our best to reply to some general questions around the program options. So I think you alluded to it, Mr. Manning, but if you can talk a little bit, what I noted was that many of the working parents of our young children have some concerns around the flexibility if they choose, just flexibility in general. I think you talked about the need to potentially record so that parents can refer to it later. We know working parents with little ones have less flexibility than working parents with older children. So can you speak to how we're taking in some of that inquiry and input from the community, and what we might be able to do to problem solve that?
Sure. So we're again thinking about families who are not during the school day able to oversee their children's learning and what's happening while the children are engaging with their teacher online at the same time as they might be working at home or might not even be at home at all. So I think that what we're really looking at right now, we're weighing out different options, but going back to the idea of recording some of the lessons and having aspects of those lessons available at home for for parents to provide to their children later in the evening, and then some guidance around what work should accompany those lessons. So if there's, for example, a 20-minute math lesson that's been recorded with the teacher providing some direct instruction, we would provide some guidance around how can a parent follow up with that lesson, and then what are some of the activities that would follow that lesson to continue the learning, even though the child may not be able to engage in that entire time of learning when the teacher's available during that 2.5 hours, if it's just not feasible for the parent to do that.
Now we know parents will want that answer right away, and I just have to remind everyone with the constraints that I discussed at the beginning, we do work with some constraints. So all of the sort of implementation details, we do need to work in partnership with our Teachers Association. All of these decisions have impact on teacher working conditions. And so we are currently in constant dialogue and negotiations, worked on in a session yesterday with the Teachers Association, scheduled to do it again tomorrow. So it's very helpful for us to see what some of the needs are so that we can refine our program models to the best of our ability. We are not going to be able to meet everyone's individual's desires and needs, but we'll do our best to create a model that can address sort of, core needs that are out there for many of our parents. And so again, it's helpful for us to hear about, especially with little ones, the need for some potential flexibility. We need to do attendance accounting still, so that's a constraint, that's a requirement by the state of California. So again, these are all implementation details that we will be working through, so thank you for the input. I think we have 18 hands up, and if questions can stay fairly broad and not about unique circumstances, I'll go ahead and start to take as many as I can until we hit, for the next 20 minutes. So I see a lot of them coming up, and I know we won't be able to get to all of them. But Mr. Ruiz, let's go ahead and get started with the first wave of hands that are up with some questions.
Yes, ma'am. So Megan Hurd. Wait. Sorry, let's go with Trista Deliciana. Go ahead, Trista. You have to unmute your mic.
We can't hear you, Trista. Okay, go ahead, Manny.
Simone O'Neill.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. So in the virtual learning piece, there is a question still sitting out there. I know you have said that basically it'll be Napa Valley Unified teachers who are teaching, but is there going to be any effort to try to, for example, keep kids from the same school together? And ideally, if there is a teacher from that school, try to place that teacher with the kids. So that's kind of the first part of my question. Do you want me to ask the other part, or would you like to answer that first?
Go ahead, ask the second one.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, and then in the schedule, so it sounds like unlike in the in-person model where we're seeing basically there'll be morning cohorts and then afternoon cohorts, for the virtual academy, I don't think there's been any announcement yet as to what time of the day that would be happening. So is that also going to be split up into morning and afternoon sessions as well? And then the third piece of it, and it's my last part of the question, is if we elect the in-person model, and when that time comes, we're not comfortable sending our children back. I understand that you're saying you'd like us to select one or the other, but are we going to be precluded from joining the virtual academy at that time? And in other words, entering homeschooling at that point? So those are my three questions.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
You want to go for it, Pat?
Oh, or you can, if you want to start with the.
So the first one is, I know that might be sort of an answer that everyone wants to know if kids will be cohorted by school with a teacher from that school to keep connectivity to their home school if they choose the virtual learning academy. And we can understand that. We can't promise that right now. It really does depend on the numbers. And so there's a possibility that if the numbers work out and we have the ability to group kids by grade levels at school and can staff that with a teacher from that school, there's a potential for that, but we cannot guarantee that. So there's a lot of implications around the numbers of kids that enroll, how the spread of numbers land across the various elementary sites, and then our staffing needs. And so we're not able to commit to that. So, but do we understand that that would add value if it's possible and the numbers play out that way? We absolutely would aim to do that if it were possible. Do you want to answer the questions around the schedule for the Virtual Learning Academy in the afternoon?
Yes, the schedule for the Virtual Learning Academy was going to mirror the schedule for the online to in-person, so that they would be very similar in terms of the amount of time, and it would either be morning or afternoon.
I forgot the third one, Simone.
Am I still unmuted?
You are.
Yes.
Okay, so then just staying on that for 1 second. So you're saying then basically it's by last name for the virtual academy piece.
I think there might be more flexibility in that in the Virtual Learning Academy. It really comes down to the numbers of students.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the last piece was around if someone elects the in-person model, which we understand is virtual right now, and when it moves to in-person, if we are not comfortable at that time, sending our children back. I know that you're wanting us to try to choose between the two, but there are many unknowns for parents right now. So assuming we were not comfortable at that time, will the virtual academy even be a potential, or are we essentially then forced out of the district into homeschooling?
Yeah, so we're working through what those transition criterion for transition process for that transition would look like. We want you to stay with us. We don't want anyone to have to leave the district. But at the same time, right, we need to, obviously there's implications and consent around staffing, being able to reassign and adjust staff. So we want as much as possible for that commitment to be there out the gate, but we will make those considerations on a case-by-case basis. And our aim is to keep as many families as possible in the district, and we know that we do that by providing options that are clear for us as an organization. So thank you for your question, Simone. We're gonna continue because there's lots of hands up, so thank you.
Okay, Michelle?
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, I'm sorry. I didn't put my hand down. I don't have a question. I just wanted you to turn off the chat when all of that craziness was going on. So thank you.
Yep, the Napa
No
Valley
problem.
School District has no tolerance for discrimination nor discriminatory language. And so my apologies that that occurred in today's session, but we have no tolerance for it. We're an organization based on equity, inclusiveness, and we are taking an anti-racist approach to education. And so we don't appreciate the language. So thank you, Michelle, for being in alignment with those principles.
Go ahead, Brad.
Brad, we can't hear you, Brad. We can't hear you, Brad. You have to unmute.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I accidentally pressed my hand up. I didn't I didn't intentionally. I don't have a question, so you can move on to the next. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Brad.
Secret Right.
Hi, Secret. Miss Wright. We can't hear you. We can hear you now, yes.
Okay, hi. I'm sorry, I'm in Target now, but I wanted to know, sorry, I'm on my bill, whether it's in the in-person learning and it's the teacher or one of the students. What did you guys plan to address that situation, and when the person can return, and what happens if it's a student and if they have to, like, will they be able to transition to virtual learning during that time period? Do you guys have any thoughts around that at this time?
Did anyone hear it? She broke up in the beginning.
Yes, I heard it. So she's asking what the plan is for students who, if they have symptoms of COVID, or what's the plan for if that happens and occurs. And we have pretty strict guidance from Napa County Public Health that we would follow in regards to if a student or a staff member tested positive for COVID.
And
Yep.
and would the student or the class itself, would they be quarantined, and would they go to virtual learning at that time?
Well, and that's part of the reason why we wanted to have a robust distance learning platform, is that students could transition in and out of in-person to online.
And will they, if a person has to, let's say, transition home for a period to be cleared for an illness, will they continue with the same learning module, like with the same cohort?
Yeah.
Because I know you were talking about the distance versus the, in person being possibly different.
So if you're in person, right? If you're in person, the teachers, the staff, the cohort of kids are all people that were willing to go on the phased journey of moving through phase 1 to that phase 3 hybrid, potentially ultimately phase 4. And if there are any reasons to shut down a classroom and or a school or a hallway, for example, it depends on the contact tracing. We go through the entire protocol with Napa County Public Health, those students would then, with that teacher, if they need to be quarantined, they would stay with that teacher during the quarantining period and then return once, you know, we've met all the criterion for the all clear to return back into the in-person. Okay? So we're
Thank you.
You're welcome, Ms. Wright. We're gonna keep moving along. So next question.
Ruthie?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so my son's going to a dual language immersion magnet school. Will he have similar teachings in Spanish, or will it be in English? Because I feel like he'll fall behind if it changes languages.
Ruthie, you bring up a great question that actually was kind of an emerging theme. So an emerging theme was in the Virtual Learning Academy, will we have access to specialized programs? We cannot commit to full access to all specialized program. The district has financial constraints. We can't replicate the exact model in the Virtual Learning Academy that we could provide in our regular sort of in-person phased-in approach. That's true for things like, well, this is elementary, but you'll hear about it later for middle school or high school. You know, AP courses, course offerings may be limited. There's been some questions around the International Baccalaureate program. Will we be able to guarantee that in the Virtual Learning Academy? The answer to most of those is no, except for immersion. It does, you know, it depends how the numbers lie. For the immersion program, students absolutely who have chosen that educational model need language continuity, or it is a massive disruption to both their language acquisition and their academic development. So we will need to find staffing to address the immersion needs in Spanish for Virtual Learning Academy. Now, what does that mean potentially? That means that there might be some combination classrooms if the number of combination grade levels in the immersion Spanish-based version of the Virtual Learning Academy, because again, the numbers are not gonna all land perfectly for us. And so, but we're very tuned into the needs of language continuity in K-5 immersion and you know, looking at access to, we also have the 6-12 strand and what the Spanish and at those levels look like as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Whaley? Oh,
We
wait,
have Ben Kramer.
Ben Kramer.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Good. My kids have two different last names, and I wanted to know if we were to do the transition to in-person learning, would they be required to do two, because one of them's earlier in the alphabet, one of them's later in the alphabet. Would they be required to stay with the AM PM, or could they both go to the AM and PM course together?
Instruction?
Yeah.
I'll answer that. We would make, you know, allowances and that would be done at the site level for situations like that. We recognize that not everyone in the same family or same household has the same last name. And so we would have a process for which to make that so that your children would go to, would have the same time period.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Whaley?
Hi, I had a question. At the schedule that was presented by Matt Manning, the subjects were ELA and math, but what about the other subjects like social studies, science, health, PE, art, music? Are those going to be able to be covered as well, or is it strictly math and ELA?
So I'll respond to that. So our language arts program at the elementary level in Napa covers many of the science and social studies standards. So the language arts program is really grounded in learning language arts, reading through and writing through the study of social studies and science. So we would incorporate those two content areas in that way. I am currently working with our PE and music teachers on options for how that will look for next year in the virtual academy, the distance learning phase, and then when we come back, when we bring students back to campus in phase 2 and 3. So we're working on that right now.
Thank you, Whaley. Next.
Ann Rosen?
Hi, can you hear me?
We
Yes,
can.
ma'am.
Okay, great. Thank you. This has been really helpful to understand the different options and the schedules. I was leaning with my son toward the Virtual Learning Academy, but I think I was falsely presenting to him that he would be with his friends from school and a teacher from his school, but just not interacting directly. So I guess it's just a comment. I was hoping to hear more of a commitment from the school district to say, yes, if there's a teacher that wants to do it and there's 24 kids in that grade, we will sync you up, because I think it's going to be more traumatic for him to be in a class with a teacher he's never heard of and 11 other students he's never heard of than to go on the phased in approach. But I'm not comfortable with the phased in approach. So I guess what I'm hoping is for a little more of a commitment from the school district to say, yes, we're going to do our best to hook up the Virtual Learning Academy kids and students. And that's what I'm not hearing. But I also appreciate the challenges, and I know why the chat was turned off, because I saw the comments. So thank you.
Yep. So we agree with you, Ms. Rosen. So the commitment's there. If it's 24 kids at a grade level and we can repurpose the staffing assignments, like we do have that intention. I just don't want to create the false expectation that that would be happening and replicated for every single person in the scenario. So we will do our best, but we cannot create, what I need people to understand is that we have obviously staffing and financial constraints. We cannot replicate a full model in the Virtual Learning Academy, but if the numbers allow and when the opportunities are there, you do have our commitment, because we understand that that's in the best interest of the students and families. So we philosophically agree, but we might face some constraints and barriers when we get to implementation, depending on how the numbers land. So tell your second grader, was it a second grader?
He's going into 4th grade.
Your 4th grader. Tell your 4th grade kiddo that that's the intent. The district's going to do the best they can, but we can't guarantee it. So I know people are hesitant to fill out the learning options without feeling all of those questions are answered, the details around the enrichment and the PE and whether there's going to be flexibility, recordings or not. But we really need to get a sense of the numbers, because the numbers help us with the program design. So it's a little bit of a give and take of, you know, making that choice, informing us of your choice, so that we can really start to see how the numbers shake out, and we can deal with all of the cohorting implications, the staffing implications. So we look forward, we thank the 4,000 people who turned in their form, and we look forward to receiving thousands of more in the next few days. So thank you, Ms. Rosen.
Thank you.
Next.
Okay, Sabrina Wolf.
Hi, thank you. I'm wondering what criteria will be used to determine when to move from phase 1 to phase 2, phase 2 to phase 3, and so on. And then my second question is, if more people opt into the virtual learning than expected so that class sizes are naturally reduced, will the district kind of reconsider, you know, the need to break into, you know, AM and PM cohorts?
Can you repeat the last part, Sabrina, real quick? The second question?
Yeah, that if more people opt into the virtual learning academy so that, you know, the in-person learning groups are naturally reduced to a smaller size, would the district kind of reconsider the need to break into AM and PM cohorts?
Okay, I'll let instruction go ahead and answer the second one. Let me address your question regarding criterion across phases, Sabrina. So we will be working closely with Napa County Public Health, just like we worked closely with them to get to the decision around starting in phase 1. There's a variety of public health criterion, and there's just tons of data points, from infection rates to hospitalization rates to IC units filled, whether, you know, ventilators are available. Even trends in surrounding counties shape and influence the decisions of Napa County Public Health, because as surrounding counties get impacted, it may have potential implications in our county. So we have not scripted any strict criterion. We're lucky we're in a small county, so we have access to our public health official and office with quite a bit of regularity. So it'll be a collaboration with her, and she will actually sort of announce when we've reached some clearance levels beyond just the criterion of being off the 14 days, other data that's, there's going to be the same criterion that gets us off that watch list and then gets us cleared for those 14 days. So the school district has not scripted criterion. We will work with county health around that. I'm going to let Pat Andrew Jennings answer the question around the virtual learning academy.
Yes, and we've considered that possibility that we would have enough families that chose the virtual learning option to, maybe possibly not do the AM/PM. Which goes back to why it's so important that we get the information from families so that we can make some more firm decisions around scheduling and what the offerings might be. So we've gone down that rabbit hole. We've gone down many rabbit holes trying to figure out what's best for us to move forward.
Okay, we'll take one last question, and then we have to, some of you may be joining and transitioning with us to the middle school. So one last question.
Maria Reyes. Ms. Reyes. You have to unmute your mic, Ms. Reyes. No.
Okay, let's move on. One last one.
Yeah. Steph.
Are you guys there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, wonderful. So one of the things that I wanted to ask about is the family learning series that was brought up. How is that going to work for parents that are working? Is it something that will be recorded, or is it something that will be done like later in the evening on a Zoom meeting?
Yes, we understand that parents aren't available always during the day, and so some of the sessions will be scheduled for at night, and some of them would be things that you can do what we would say asynchronous learning. So you could do them on your own,
Okay.
and we do plan to have some sort of like drop-in help sessions so that families could, if a parent had a question, they could drop in and talk with someone to kind of help problem solve whatever issues they're having.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll take one last one before we go to middle school.
Okay, Mike. You have to unmute your mic, Mike.
We can't hear you, Mike. Okay. I think we're going to have to end there. We've got to get the middle school parent meeting started. So I know there were still 80 hands up. We want to thank you for your attendance. Again, my apologies that we had to turn the chat off. But again, we have no tolerance here for derogatory, racially derogatory language or discrimination in our school district. So that was really unfortunate. I appreciate everyone's understanding. We will continue to hold session like these as we move through the various decision-making phases. As we learn more and we believe it's worth gathering you together as parents, we will. But again, we're hoping that after today's session, you feel better informed and able to fill out that enrollment options form. So we're going to go meet with our middle school families. Thank you very much again for your time, and have a great evening with your families. A nice summer evening. All right. Thank you very much.